Up next in the broadcast, public safety is the key campaign pledge for the upcoming June 4th local elections as government scrambles to address heightened public distrust after the Sewol-ho ferry disaster. Even after news of Samsung Electronics Chairman Lee Kunhee's hospitalization following a heart attack, shares of the tech giant rise on expectations that succession plans may gain traction. And Nigeria says it's not taking up Boko Haram on its offer to free the kidnapped schoolgirls in exchange for imprisoned Islamic militants. Primetime News begins now. Welcome to Primetime News. I'm Sean Lim.
Thanks for joining us. I am Kang Cheri.
We begin with the local elections that are heating up. 3 weeks to go before the June 4th day at the ballots, and the ruling and opposition parties are set to launch their respective campaigns.
The ruling's Henry Party and the main opposition, New Politics Alliance for Democracy, will complete their candidate nominations before registration starts on Thursday, setting up the stage for the candidates to hit the campaign trail on May 22nd. 17 provincial and city seats will be up for grabs. So what platform will the two main parties be campaigning on? The buzzword seems to be safety in light of the Sewol ferry disaster.
Earlier today, the parties released campaign pledges which largely focused on boosting national safety and crisis management systems. Kim Young-gil has more on the safety campaign.
The government's poor initial response to the Sewol-ho ferry accident last month has outraged the Korean public. The insufficient safety measures and lack of capacity to handle such accidents are likely to dominate the campaign period over the next few weeks, heading into Election Day on June 4th. Both the ruling's Henry Party and the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy have called on the National Assembly to conduct a special investigation to come up with ways to help lawmakers write better bills aimed at preventing future accidents. The ruling party's candidate for Seoul Mayor Chung Mong-jun promised he would prioritize safety issues if elected and carry out massive reforms on the capital's safety management system. Current Seoul Mayor Park Won-jun has also decided to put the issue at the center of his election campaign to reflect mounting public demands for a safer Seoul. It's something we're likely to see in the other metropolitan and provincial races leading up to June 4th. With public distrust of government growing in recent weeks in light of the Sewol-ho ferry disaster, the results on Election Day could very well depend on which party the people trust more to institute change. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
And the probe into the shadowy family network that owned the ill-fated Sewol-ho ferry has been progressing quite slowly in recent days, as some key figures have been refusing to show up for questioning. In order to turn the screws on the no-shows, prosecutors are raising the legal stakes. Kwon So-ah has the details.
The weeks-long investigation into the Sewol-ho ferry disaster is struggling to shift into top gear as key figures are refusing to show up for questioning. In order to turn the screws on the no-shows, prosecutors are raising the legal stakes. Prosecutors have been granted an arrest warrant for the first son of the practical owner of the ferry, Yoo Byung-an, Yoo Dae-gyun, who did not appear for questioning on Monday. They also got permission to raid Yoo's home, but a group of over a dozen prosecutors, police, and firemen looking for him failed to locate his whereabouts, which means he may be in hiding. Yoo Byung-an, the former Sewol Group chairman and practical owner of the Sewol-ho ferry's operator Cheongjin Marine Company, has been summoned to appear before prosecutors on Friday by 10 a.m. This comes after Yoo's two sons and first daughter failed to appear for questioning. The Yoo family and its close associates are suspected of being involved in embezzlement and tax evasion and a direct connection to the ferry sinking, as safety measures were ignored in renovating the ship and also during the process of overloading cargo on the ship. The latest investigations have revealed that Yoo Byung-an was involved in the management of the ship just 2 months before the accident. That's why the Joint Investigation Headquarters believes you could be the top person in charge and the person most responsible for the disaster. Meanwhile, financial authorities are delving deeper in possible monetary irregularities. The Financial Supervisory Service says it began a new probe a couple of days ago on the National Federation of Fisheries Cooperatives and Sinan Capital, which have granted loans to Yoo Byung-on's associates in the past. This comes as financial authorities vowed to leave no stone unturned with relation to Yoo's finances. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
And prosecutors are considering homicide charges for the captain of the sunken Sewol-ho ferry because he was one of the first to abandon the ship, leaving the passengers unattended. And the state auditor plans to launch a probe on Wednesday into the government, including the Korea Coast Guard, in order to figure out whether their response to the ferry disaster was sufficient. Prosecutors say some of the Coast Guard members could be charged with negligent homicide as well as negligence of duty, as none of them tried to enter the sinking ferry in their initial rescue attempt. And in other news, Korea and Japan will hold a second round of talks this week on the still unresolved issue of Japan's sexual enslavement of Korean women during World War II. But many are skeptical that any concrete progress will be made this time around. Hwang Sung-hee reports.
Senior diplomats from Korea and Japan will continue talks this week on Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women. Seoul's foreign ministry said Tuesday that Lee Sang-duk, Director General of the Northeast Asian Affairs Bureau, will meet with his Japanese counterpart Junichi Ihara on Thursday in Tokyo. The South Korean ministry said it has been holding consultations with comfort women since their first meeting with Japan last month.
Government officials, including those from the Foreign Ministry, are currently collecting the opinions of the comfort women and others related to the victims. This will be the basis of our stance in the upcoming talks with Japan.
More than 200,000 women, mostly Korean, were forced to serve the Japanese military at comfort stations in the early 20th century. Tokyo claims the issue was settled through a 1965 treaty when the two countries normalized diplomatic ties. The comfort women are demanding an official apology and legal compensation from Japan. The two sides may also discuss other matters, including Korea's import restrictions on Japanese fishery products that were imposed amid radiation concerns in the aftermath of the Fukushima nuclear plant disaster. Japan's push to regain the right to collective self-defense may also come up during this week's talks. Not much progress was made at the first meeting, but remarks made by U.S. President Barack Obama during his visit to Seoul last month are fueling hopes for some concrete results at the upcoming talks.
This was a terrible, egregious violation of human rights, even in the midst of war. Was shocking.
But Tokyo's sincerity in settling the comfort women issue still remains in question, as Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has recently refused to follow in the footsteps of Germany in addressing its wartime atrocities. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
Curry's comments came in response to
your gateway to the day's biggest stories in Korea and around the world. Breaking news, the hottest interviews, and a whole lot more. Join Arirang Sean Lim and Kang Che-ri from the heart of Seoul.
News begins now.
Primetime News, weeknights, live at 10 on Arirang TV.
Samsung Electronics Chairman Lee Kunhee is reportedly recovering from his heart attack and is currently receiving hypothermia treatment in hospital. The Samsung Medical Center in southern Seoul says Mr. Lee was scheduled to end the treatment this morning, but the doctors decided to continue to minimize any possible damage to the 72-year-old's heart and brain. Hypothermia treatment keeps the body at a temperature of between 32 to 34 degrees Celsius to prevent toxic materials from generating in the blood. He is reportedly in stable condition and breathing on his own. As for the market reaction, though, we saw a positive take on the news of Chairman Lee's health challenges. Samsung Electronics shares gained over the last 2 days with a jump of 4% yesterday. Kim Ji-yeon explains what's behind the stock rise.
One day after Samsung Electronics Chairman Lee Kunhee was hospitalized, shares of the tech giant gained the most they had in 9 months. Shares of the company jumped 4% on Monday, closing the day at around $1,400. They continue with the gains on Tuesday as well, up nearly 0.9%. Analysts say Samsung's succession plan played a big part in the gain, as the company has a contingency for such events. Lee's son Tae-yong is likely to inherit Samsung Electronics, the flagship of the group. He and his 2 sisters will be splitting up some of the group's other affiliates.
There are a lot of expectations about a speedy restructuring and succession due to the deteriorating health conditions of Chairman Lee Kunhee. During the restructuring process, the most likely scenario is that Samsung Electronics will buy more of its own shares, leading to an increase in share prices.
Samsung Securities Company, Korea's largest brokerage by market value, will sell its entire stake to Samsung Life Insurance Company. Another affiliate information and communication technology provider, Samsung SDS Company, plans to sell shares in Korea this year. Behind me, that's the hospital where Lee Kunhee is being treated, and his health is on the minds of global investors. But this is not the first time. Lee was hospitalized back in 2008 and again in 2009, and both times shares of Samsung Electronics gained, suggesting that the company is not entirely dependent on just one individual. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
While Korea's per capita GDP has grown steadily over the years, the Park Geun-hye administration won't be satisfied until the number hits the $40,000 mark by 2017. But our Park Ji-won tells us the goal is ambitious and won't come without challenges.
One of the key goals set by the Park Geun-hye administration is achieving a per capita GDP of over $40,000 by the end of her term in 2017. There's a long way to go, as last year the figure came in at about $24,000. So what challenges are likely to face the Korean economy as it aims for the $30,000 and $40,000 milestones? Experts say the first one is expanding domestic demand.
As Korea's export-driven economic growth has somewhat reached its limit, the expansion of domestic demand will be the key to achieving a per capita GDP of more than $40,000. It's important to have a virtuous cycle of creating new markets in the leisure, culture, and welfare sectors that will bring about further employment and output expansion.
Experts point out those sectors have ample room to grow in the Korean economy. The recently released OECD Better Life Index shows Korean people work over 2,000 hours a year, far higher than the OECD average of some 1,700 hours. And the sectors related to achieving a better work-life balance have potential to grow. Increasing domestic demand in the sectors could also help address the nation's widening income gap. According to the latest OECD figures, people in Korea's top 20% income bracket were earning nearly 6 times as much as the bottom 20% last year, which hinders healthy growth and domestic consumption. While the focus has been on bumping up the nominal per capita GDP, experts say it ultimately doesn't mean that much. The key, they say, is developing an economy that achieves real, robust growth. For example, it took the U.S. 17 years to jump from a per capita income of $20,000 to $40,000, and it took Japan 8 years. The achievement was due mainly to the appreciation of yen rather than from real growth, which made the Japanese economy less competitive in export markets and ultimately led to an economic slowdown. To avoid such risks, experts stress it's important to institute appropriate measures to induce real growth in the lesser developed areas of the economy. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Well, reaching per capita GDP of $40,000 may put smiles on many people's faces, but how likely will the nation's youth be able to take part?
If recent trends continue, the ones who are expected to drive the country's future growth may find themselves in a deeper hole, as findings show credit ratings of Korean teens and those in their 20s are worsening pretty fast.
Joining us today for more on this is Professor Oh Jung-gun from Korea University. So, Professor, what is behind this deterioration in credit among the nation's youth?
I think that one of the severe issues is the job mismatch problem between the job which government or the Korean economy can provide and the job which young generation want to have. Actually, young generation want to have only decent jobs in so-called knowledge-based, high-value-added service industry, such as finance, banking, or education, or this kind of broadcasting, etc. But such job is not sufficient to provide to almost more than 500,000 college graduates every year. After even graduation, they have no income, so they cannot repay the bank loans which they used while they study. That's a big issue now.
I thought the Park Kun-hee administration was all about job creation in the beginning. What's stalling progress on that front?
Actually, Park Kun-hee government implemented a job creation policy, mostly which they are addressed to provide jobs at the small and medium scale industry or part-time jobs. But as I mentioned, most Korean young generation do not like work at the small and medium scale industry or as part-time jobs.
Well, much of the upcoming local elections will focus on public safety, especially in light of the recent Sewol-ho ferry disaster. In that case, many people can say the, quote, adults were not there for the children. But who is there right now for the people in their 20s? Who's representing their political voice or a civic voice that might be able to shape their future in terms of the economy?
I believe some Korean young generations are maybe frustrated because of in the last election, most candidates raised issues for young generations, but now suddenly the issues for young generations have lost only, as I mentioned, on the other hand, they issued safety issues. Young generation also must understand this situation. Now, Korea also, we must allocate more resources for safety. That means maybe job creation cannot be provided as they expected.
Sure. And the 20s generation in the past used to be very vocal and active. Do they need to do something to help themselves maybe? And if you think so, how can they do it?
Well, I think in the 20s in Korea, I think among all generations, 20s are most severe in Korea. We must develop high value-added service industry, which young generation want to have a job. That's we need deregulation because of in order to develop high value-added industry, we must need deregulation for such industry, finance, education, etc. Actually, which have been regulated so strongly by the government.
All right, Professor Oh, thank you so much for your insights and comments tonight.
Welcome.
The United States says it's launching aerial surveillance missions over Nigeria to help find the hundreds of schoolgirls kidnapped by Islamist militants.
With more on that, we now turn to Paul Yee standing by at the news center. Paul, it's been nearly a month since these girls were abducted, but a new online video has clues as to their current condition.
Well, it's the first time the world has seen the kidnapped girls since they were taken in the middle of their night from the boarding school. In a video released by Boko Haram, the girls say they've converted to Islam but appear to be unharmed. With more on the terror group's ransom offer, our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
The Nigerian terror group Boko Haram released a 27-minute video on YouTube Monday. in which they say they'll release some of the teenage girls they kidnapped last month in exchange for jailed fighters.
Wallah, billahi alladhi la ilaha illahu, ha'ula'i al-banat la natrukuhunna illa ba'da ma taraktum ikhwanana.
Around 130 of the abducted girls were shown in the video wearing full veils, citing the first verse of the Quran. The Nigerian government says it is reviewing all options, but the nation's interior minister appeared to dismiss the offer, saying no exchange would take place. Nigeria has deployed 2 army divisions for the search and rescue operations, while several countries, including the United States, France, and Israel, have sent experts to the region. U.S. State Department spokeswoman Jen Psaki on Monday said that Washington has deployed manned surveillance aircraft to Nigeria and is sharing commercial satellite imagery with the Nigerian government to help in the search. Boko Haram militants abducted more than 300 schoolgirls in mid-April from a boarding school in the north of Nigeria. Some have since escaped, but well over 200 are still being held. The militant group has been engaged in violent campaigns against the Nigerian government since 2009. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
And moving on to the deepening crisis in Ukraine. Celebrations are taking place in the eastern Ukrainian cities of Donetsk and Luhansk following Sunday's referendums, with pro-Russian separatists claiming the regions as independent states. The official figures from the elections were announced on Monday, giving the rebels a landslide victory for self-determination. But the U.S. and EU member nations are calling into question the credibility of the results. Upon his arrival in Kiev, the European Council's President Herman Van Rompuy called the self-rule referendums illegal and illegitimate. Meanwhile, the U.S. military began conducting massive nuclear arms drills just days after Russia carried out similar exercises. The U.S. Strategic Command said the drills will run through May 16th, with B-52 heavy bombers taking part in the nuclear deterrence drills. And turning now to the U.S., Singapore's foreign minister has arrived in Washington for talks with American State Secretary John Kerry. Standing alongside his Singaporean counterpart, Kerry said the U.S. was concerned about what he described as China's challenge to the Paracel Islands. Last week, tensions rose in the South China Sea when a giant Chinese oil rig and other vessels were positioned in the resource-rich area, which is also claimed by Vietnam. Ships from both sides remain at a standoff after exchanging water cannon fodder over the past few days. Kerry criticized China for the, quote, aggressive act and called for a peaceful resolution through an international maritime agreement. In response, Beijing's foreign minister has urged Kerry to objectively and fairly look at the South China Sea dispute while blaming the U.S. for encouraging such behavior. That wraps up our look at international stories making headlines around the world. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Hello and welcome to Primetime Sports. I'm Stephen Che. This year's Asian Games, taking place in Incheon, is going to be a big spectacle when it rolls around in September, as more than 12,000 athletes have signed up to compete. The pre-registration process wrapped up at the Olympic Solidarity/Olympic Council of Asia Regional Forum in Myanmar, with the National Olympic Committees of 44 nations, minus North Korea, handing in their list of delegates. And of the 17,918 athletes and officials registered, organizers are guessing about 14,000 will take part, making the 17th Asiad the largest ever. The Games open later this year on September 19th. And for football news, things just got a bit more lively for South Korea's national team as 4 German league players arrived in Paju for World Cup training camp. That includes Leverkusen strikers Hon Heung-min, Mainz midfielder Koo Ja-chul, and Augsburg's frontman Ji Dong-won and defender Hong Jung-ho for an injection of offensive prowess and defensive muscle. And with that, the squad grew from 9 players to 13 for the second day of training. Now let's get to Tuesday's top KBO matchups, starting with the Tucson Bears and SK Wyverns in Incheon. Now we go on to the first inning. It's Tusan's Jorge Cantu starting the rally. It's 3-0 Tusan. Now they add 2 in the third before SK answers back. Kim Sung-yeon, he hits a homer. Soon it's 5-2 Bears. Now we go to the fifth. SK's Kim Kang-min, he belts a 2-run shot to come within 1, but Tusan responds as Hong Sung-eun, he gets his third hit, a home run to right. And Tusan holds on to win this one 9-6. Now we go over to Masan for the Kia Tigers NC Dinos matchup. Now first inning, Kia's Shin Jong-gil, he drives in 2 off of a double before NC answers back in the third with Lee Ho-jun's 3-run long ball. It's 3-2 NC. NC pads the score, adding 2 more off a Ji-seok-kun double in the 6th. Then it's Kia in the 8th. Brett Pill slams a 3-run homer to make it 5-5. And in the bottom of the 9th, Lee Ho-jun, again, he gets the walk-off hit. NC wins 6-5. And looking at the other games, Samsung defeats Hanwha 7-1. Meanwhile, LG blanks Lotte 5-0 as LG's new manager gets his first win. Well, that wraps up all I have in the sports world. This has been Stephen Che. I'll see you back here later for more from the world of sports.
It was a rather hot day here in Seoul with many donning summer attire today.
That's right. And for more, we turn to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung, take it away.
Good evening, guys. The mercury rose to 26 degrees here in Seoul with absolutely sunny skies. However, as the evening progresses, the southern regions will gradually be at the edge of a high-pressure system from waters south of Jeju. Now, this will lead to late-night showers on Jeju, and through tomorrow, about 10 to 40 millimeters of precipitation is expected, so an umbrella will come in handy. Earlier today, Gumi of Gyeongsang-bukdo province soared to a hot 31 degrees. More summer-like conditions are in store for tomorrow, and otherwise a strong wind watch continues to be in effect in Gangwon-do province. A big gap in temperatures will stick around, though, as Seoul starts off the day at 14 degrees with a high of 26. Gwangju and Busan reach 22. Now let's see how other regions are looking. Daejeon tops out at 25 degrees, Dokdo and Mount Kumgang peak at 18 and 16. And that's all for now, but don't forget to tune in for more after midnight.
And that does it for this edition of Primetime News. Thanks for watching.
And we'll see you back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.